is a note to the forgotten feminine, with love letters to and from all kinds of women. Here for the daughters carrying the world upon their spine, wherefore the silence of our grandmothers we rise. Here to remember our power and shed our doubt. Forget the bullshit the patriarchy's on about. This is an ode to the forgotten feminine, with love letters to and from all kinds of women.
I want to start this episode off with a little something vulnerable, which is that you do not realize how much you are holding yourself back in life until you take a deep breath. I was just watching a video by probably one of my new favorite creators on YouTube. Her name is Vanessa Aldrich, and she was talking about diaphragmatic breathing, which, for those of you that don't know, the diaphragm is a muscle that sits between our heart and our stomach, and it literally facilitates the in and outflow of breath from our lungs by expanding and contracting our chest cavity. And she was talking about how that muscle holds a lot of our shame and people-pleasing wounds and perfectionism wounds. And she's an opera singer, so she was encouraging viewers to do some diaphragmatic breathing, which is just basically breathing into your belly and imagining that muscle expanding all the way to the bottom of your stomach and all the way back up. And it's funny because as a content creator, as a coach, as a podcast host, I tell myself, and I like to think I'm very comfortable sharing things with the world. And I always prepare myself for episodes by thinking of things I want to say, and I get super, super excited. And then I did this diaphragmatic breathing exercise, and I was struck by how much of that excitement was actually fear, and how that fear was controlling some of the things, not the things that I wanted to say, but rather how I wanted to start off the podcast episode, or the hook that I wanted to start with, honestly, because I felt like what I wanted to say was not good enough. Like I had to put this like attention grabbing thing to earn people's time here. And after that exercise, I feel so happy and so calm just being myself and being with what I have to share with you today. So I think that resounds perfectly for this episode, because if you're an overthinking girly like me, whose shoulders are always tense, you overanalyze every interaction, situation, even the smallest of ones, this episode is going to touch something in you. And this is especially true if you are someone who is always on the chase to constantly fix yourself. And even when it feels like you've made strides to build awareness around your patterns, you never quite feel at peace with that resolution. And I'm here to tell you why today. If you're new, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back to the Letters to and From Women podcast. I'm your host, Mariana, and I'm also the founder of my somatic coaching practice, The Enlightened Women, where I am helping women rebuild self-trust and safety after complex trauma. And I felt compelled to make this episode for you today because about 2.5 months ago, I returned from a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat, which I will explain what Vipassana is in a moment. But essentially, this was a 10-day retreat where I was silent, without human interaction. I was surrounded by fellow participants, but we were not allowed to talk or make eye contact for 10 days. We were meditating in silence for 12 hours a day. We had to give up our phones. We had to give up any pictures outside snacks. We could only eat the two meals and like the snack that was given to us at the end of the day. Wake up at 4 a.m. every day to start meditating immediately. And when we weren't eating or meditating or napping, we were outdoors walking or in silence with our own thoughts. And this might sound quite crazy to some. You might be like, what on earth would compel you to seek an experience like this? And that is because I needed to severely pattern interrupt. And let me set the scene for you when I made this decision. It was October of 2025. I was severely burnt out beyond capacity, but gaslighting myself out of acknowledging that I was beyond capacity. I was working at a mental health and substance abuse job for 5 to 8 hours a day, and then coming home and working on my business most evenings while being a daughter, a partner, a friend. I actually decided to take a step back from my business for some time, because if you listen to my previous episode on burnout and the radical routine that I designed myself to heal my nervous system state, you'll know that my business wasn't feeling like mine. I realized that I had been running it based off of what everybody else was doing that looked like it was working, because I kept telling myself that how I wanted to do things and how I wanted to share my voice was not valid, and it was too artsy more than it was assertive and what I felt the energy needed to be for people to build loyalty in me. I could barely get myself out of bed in the mornings, let alone to exercise or get myself out of the house. And in so doing, I was just in this persistent freeze state where I could not break my addiction to my screen. I was always scrolling on Instagram. If it wasn't Instagram, it was YouTube. If it wasn't YouTube, it was TikTok. Because my nervous system was so fried and so overwhelmed at the thought of introducing discipline to fix that freeze, that it just perpetuated the cycle of not being productive, and it just made my guilt and therefore my overwhelm worse. And I was at my wit's end, and one day I went to go have coffee with one of my friends and fellow coaches, Jay Chung, who told me that she was leaving for this very retreat a few weeks from that day. And she told me about it, and she told me about the Buddhist philosophy behind it. And I immediately felt something in my heart and soul open up. It was as if this retreat center was calling out to me from miles away. And so I went on their website and I briefly read about their philosophy and what they do. And after looking up professionally other people's experiences on Reddit, I decided that I was going to do it. And so I lodged in an application a few days later, and 2 weeks later, I found out that I was due to go in January of 2026. So the day in January finally rolled around. I coordinated a ride with one of the fellow retreat attendees that was heading up in my direction. She picked me up and we got there. We gave one last call to our family members. We handed in our phones, and that was our monk life for the next 10 days and 11 nights. And nothing could have prepared me for the insights that I took away and the healing that happened just by learning how to be in silence. And I believe that developing the capacity to sit in silence in a world where distractions are so readily available and conveniently available to us is one of the most radically self-respecting and self-loving things that we can learn to do in 2026. Personally, my nervous system burnout healed so deeply. Sitting in silence and letting my brain settle started bringing up all these unprocessed emotions and kind of unfinished business that actually started resolving themselves in dreams that I was having of friendships that had ended, of exes that I had had time with in my life. my body started cleansing itself of everything that I was not giving attention to because I was in this constant hustle mode for productivity, valuing achievement over spending time with myself to heal what was keeping me from true peace, which is liberating ourselves from everything we think makes us unworthy of peace. And my goal for this video is to break down the 3 biggest lessons that I learned from this experience, and just to give your heart and your nervous system the hug they probably need if you're an anxious overthinker who struggles to feel worthy of rest and peace. Because what you'll find, and what we're going to talk about today, is that it's not about a lack of achievement. It's actually that most of us are lacking the capacity to sit in self-acceptance. So turn up the volume and grab a spoon if you have one nearby, because you are going to eat this up. The first lesson that I learned on this retreat, we're starting off strong here, is that when you fear alone time, you're not afraid of being with yourself. You are running from who you think you need to be. I'm going to let you let that sink in for a second. You're not running from yourself. You are running from who you think you need to be. Think about any moment in your day when life slows down, when you have a break, when you find yourself in silence, void of stimulation. And I want you to feel in your body the voice that starts to take over and guilt tripping you for not using that time to be productive, for not using that time to get your steps in a day, for not using that time to get back on your emails or to post something to your social media. And then the sensation that follows from your nervous system in response to that guilt. Do you see how it's not you that you're running from, because you are the person perceiving that voice of guilt and responding to it through avoidance, through freeze, or through productivity addiction? For me personally, one thing that I immensely struggled with going into this retreat was the guilt of feeling like shutting myself off from the world for 10 days was one of the most deeply selfish things I had ever done. The moment I accepted my spot in the retreat, I felt this massive wave of shame for not being available for my mother and sister for 10 days, not being there for my boyfriend for 10 days, shutting myself off and taking 10 unpaid days from work to seek out this experience. And so when I got to the retreat, and that voice continued to follow me, but suddenly I had handed my phone in. I was committed to finishing for the 10 days. All I could do was witness what that voice of responsibility and guilt kept saying to me. And it made me realize that it's not until we are completely alone, giving ourselves permission to be unreachable for 5-10 minutes, the only thing that's left is you and the expectations that you picked up along the way from other people about who they thought you needed to be and who you learned you had to be enough and safe and acceptable in your family and in your friend groups and in partnership. And when I sat with all of that guilt for those 10 days, it made me realize how unconsciously I was showing up in some areas of my life to fulfill and avoid that guilty voice in my head. Never taking time for myself because I was always going down my list of friends and asking myself, oh my gosh, who have I not seen that I need to reach out to and make time for so that they know that I love and care for them? Where was I doing favors and taking on extra tasks for people out of fear of disappointing them rather than out of love for serving them? When you give yourself the gift of being in that space of alone time for even 5 minutes at a time, what you're doing is you're letting your body and your unconscious mind detox themselves of these narratives, you're allowing the hurt that keeps perpetuating itself every time you act according to those beliefs to be relieved. And you start taking your power back, because after you witness where your actions are coming from, you are increasing your bandwidth for sitting with that discomfort and learning what those wounds actually need from you to heal, rather than continuing to perpetuate them out of fear of what others will perceive of you. So one more time, the first lesson I wanted to share with you is that when you avoid alone time, you're not running from yourself, you're running from who you think you need to be. The second lesson that I want to share with you from this experience is that your addiction to self-improvement is actually the root cause of your suffering. And I know that technically this podcast falls under the self-improvement category, but I want to tell you where my belief and my approach to helping you in your healing is different. So Vipassana, as a style of meditation, is what the Buddha became famous for helping people who wanted to achieve liberation and enlightenment. And his belief is that the root of all human suffering is perpetuated by our mind's tendency to react to life. And he said that we are always reacting to life from two places, either from aversion or avoidance, or from craving, addiction, and lust. So you are either perpetuating your suffering by avoiding discomfort, avoiding your pain, avoiding difficult conversations, etc., or you are perpetuating your suffering because you are addicted to having things a certain way, to lusting after people, to lusting after things and experiences that you think you need to be happy. Because what both of those tendencies of avoidance or craving reinforce is that your reality and who you are right now is not enough for you to be happy. And what the constant chase of self-improvement does is it actually perpetuates both, because on the one hand, the constant chase makes you avoid being with who you are in this moment by making you perpetually crave who you think you need to be enough and at peace. And when that hit me during this retreat, it made me never want to reach for another self-help book again. And that is not to say that all self-help books do this, that all self-help podcasts do this. Of course, it's also about the eye of the beholder and how we perceive the information that is given to us. But if we approach those resources from the belief that we are looking to somebody to fix us and to save us from our own discomfort of being fully with ourselves, we are not only giving our power away to somebody else whose life we probably know nothing about, but we are also running from the pain instead of fully sitting with it and sitting with the answers embedded in the act of feeling it and confronting it. What I have found is that if I sit and ask myself, what is keeping me from peace in this moment? I'm not asking the question of how I can be better in this moment. I'm asking the question of what fear is keeping me from being fully present and my heart from being fully open to this experience, to this person, to this challenge. And that centers me in the present instead of perpetuating that constant chase cycle towards a version of me that I think I need to be for this experience to be memorable. If you start focusing on allowing more love into your life by expanding your horizons, by expanding your learning about yourself and the world and people, like listening to a history podcast instead of your usual self-improvement or or fitness podcasts, starting new hobbies like art or writing or singing or playing an instrument, or choosing to go on a nature walk instead of turning on the news, or sitting yourself down to educate yourself more on business and productivity, that will immediately bring peace and presence into your life, because now you're not focused on constantly evolving yourself to be present. You're choosing presence through creativity and through intention. And that, my friend, is what will bring you peace. So, again, number 2, your addiction to self improvement might just be what is perpetuating your suffering. And just before I go on to lesson number 3, I just want to take a moment to invite you to a 10-day challenge that I'm hosting inside my sisterhood called Belong, a space that I have created for women who are healing from the symptoms and manifestations of complex trauma to find belonging in their stories and their experiences, where they can feel like they are not the odd one out or abnormal for how their body has manifested that complex trauma. And I'm going to be hosting a 10-day From Burnout to Alive challenge for the women who are suffering in silence, constantly pushing past their capacity because they feel they need to show up for everybody else first. And I'm going to be guiding you through the 4-week turned into 10-day process that I built and designed for myself from my knowledge of the nervous system to eradicate that low-level hum of burnout that persisted in my nervous system and kept me in functional freeze and anxiety, all using as little as 10 minutes of boredom a day. We start on April 15th. The challenge is completely free. All you need to do is create an account inside my sisterhood on the Circle app, which can be accessed on desktop or on the mobile app, which personally I recommend the mobile app because then you can be in tune with us all day, every day. You're going to receive a protocol every single day. I'm going to be going live every other day for about 10 to 20 minutes to introduce new tools for you along this journey and to give you the nervous system education to understand what is going to be happening for you throughout the journey. And you get access to our community where you can see the progress of other people and even share your own insights that have come through for you on your own journey to eradicating burnout from your nervous system. I will link the link to sign up for the challenge in the episode description. I highly recommend that you join us from April 15th to the 25th and that you do so fast, because I am even going to be offering some prizes to the women who sign up for the challenge and stick with us and share the results over those 10 days. Okay, so now on to lesson number 3 from my Vipassana experience that I think is the hug that I needed from this experience, and the hug that so many of us are unconsciously seeking. And it's, my voice is choking up because I'm just thinking about my feelings throughout the retreat and the experiences of women who I've coached and met throughout the years, and how this was the one critical piece that their nervous system didn't know that they needed. And lesson number 3 is that most of the pain you're running from is forgiveness that you never gave yourself. Oh, no. Oh my goodness. This ties back to my first point about you're actually running from who you think you need to be. Because if you think about it, when we're in that quiet space of presence with ourselves, in silence, that voice that starts coming up of guilt, of shame, is just a doorway to the beliefs and the wounds that we picked up along the way about who we needed to be enough, acceptable, lovable enough. And the step further to that is another doorway into a memory, because as children, we biologically have this tendency to retroflect or boomerang everything back onto ourselves. And in those cementing evolutionary experiences in our development, what happened is we perceived that something we had done was wrong and shamed ourselves for not being who we were absorbing we needed to be from the reactions of others. And therefore, so much of the shame that we are living from today is the shame that we still hold towards ourselves for not having been better in those moments. And we compensate as adults by people pleasing, by overextending ourselves, by overgiving, staying silent in the face of conflict. And so much of those behaviors are to compensate for the moments in youth where we didn't feel like we hit the mark. And until we make those unconscious wounds conscious, as Carl Jung so beautifully put, they will continue to run our lives. And so often, in silence, that voice that starts to take over, the guilt that starts to eat at your heart and your soul about why aren't you being more productive? Why aren't you hustling? Why aren't you this? Why aren't you that? It is actually the pain of that wound echoing through your anxiety because there's a part of you that is afraid of repeating that hurt again. And it is safer to avoid confronting that pain that we were not enough in somebody else's eyes than to let ourselves feel that pain and tune into what we actually need from ourselves. Because especially as women, we are taught to abandon our needs for more logical explanations and more logical ways of moving through this world. And so if you're listening, I hope that this can be an inviting hug for you, an invitation into reckoning with that part of you that so deeply needs your unconditional love and listening ear, because we need so much more than just to acknowledge that the pain is there and to validate it. We need to hold it, and we need to listen to how that pain wants to transmute itself into liberation. The pain itself knows, our body knows how to transmute that pain into power, into peace. But we just keep rationalizing our way through our own healing when healing is the least rational thing that we will ever indulge in as human beings. So again, lesson number 3, most of the pain you're suffering from is forgiveness that you never gave yourself, but that you are able to give yourself now. If this episode resonated for you, I just want to remind you first that you do not have to go on this 10-day Vipassana experience, even though this episode is not sponsored by them in any way, shape, or form. I would personally recommend that experience to anyone and everyone who is on their journey of self-discovery and liberation. So I'm going to link their website below so that maybe you can find a meditation center near you and enroll in one of their 10-day meditation retreats. But if you can't make the time or the money or the space to go to a 10-day retreat of theirs right now, I still invite you to my own 10-day From Burnout to Alive internet retreat, if you will, where I'm going to be taking you through the wisdom of the body that is found in the beauty of boredom and how that can help you heal your nervous system, your free state, your dissociation, to get your spark and your joy back and the answers you need about which direction to move in your life right now. If you enjoyed this episode as well, please do make sure to like, to subscribe to the channel or to the podcast if you're listening on either YouTube or Apple or Spotify. Send it to a friend, family member, or partner who you think would find this information helpful. And as always, it is such an honor and privilege to facilitate this space and to sit in these moments of wisdom with you. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode.